The ballroom glittered like something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung above white linen tables. A string quartet played softly near the stage, and hundreds of guests filled the hall with quiet conversation and polite laughter. My sister Amanda stood at the center of it all in a flawless ivory wedding gown. Cameras flashed. Guests leaned forward to watch every moment. Our parents had spared no expense. They had paid for the venue, the designer dress, the imported flowers, and the 5-tier cake standing like a monument beside the dance floor. My father lifted his champagne glass and tapped a spoon against it. The room slowly quieted. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said proudly. Applause followed. Then he looked directly at me. "And I'd especially like to thank my older daughter, Laura," he added. A few guests turned toward my table. My mother smiled thinly. "Even though Laura hasn't contributed much to this family lately," she said lightly, "she at least showed up tonight." Laughter rippled awkwardly through the room. Someone near the back muttered, "Ouch." I felt dozens of eyes settle on me. I stood slowly, reached into my purse, and placed a sealed envelope on the table. "I came prepared," I said calmly. The room fell silent. "Prepared for what?" Amanda asked. I looked at my parents. "You'll see." The silence in the ballroom stretched longer than anyone expected. My father cleared his throat. "Well," he said with a forced laugh, "Laura always did enjoy drama." A few guests chuckled nervously. Amanda shifted in her chair. "What's in the envelope?" she asked. "Documentation," I replied. The words sounded heavier than the room expected. My mother frowned. "This is not the time, Laura." "You're right," I said calmly. Then I slid the envelope toward the center of the table. But the timing seemed appropriate. Guests leaned slightly closer. My cousin Marcus whispered behind me, "What's happening?" Amanda reached for the envelope. My father stopped her hand. "Later," he said quickly. The photographer hesitated with his camera raised. The band had stopped playing entirely. Everyone could feel something underneath the surface of the moment. Amanda forced a bright smile. "Let's focus on the celebration," she said. But the damage had already begun. Because curiosity is louder than music. And every person in that ballroom knew something had just shifted. I sat back down, folded my hands calmly, and waited. 6 months earlier, I had been sitting alone in a hospital room. The window faced a gray parking lot and a line of silent trees. I had been there for 3 days after my surgery. My phone stayed mostly quiet. One message from Amanda. "Busy with wedding planning. Hope you're okay." No calls. No visits. My parents had sent flowers. The card read, "Get well soon. Love, Mom and Dad." 3 days later, a nurse asked gently, "Will someone be picking you up?" "Yes," I said. But no one came. Eventually, I called a taxi. The driver helped me into the back seat. When we arrived at my apartment, he carried my bag inside without asking for extra payment. "Family should be here for this," he said kindly. I nodded. "Yes," I answered quietly. That night, I opened my laptop and checked my bank account. I had been paying my parents' mortgage assistance for 4 years. Small transfers. $500 each month. Temporary help, my mother used to call it. I stopped the automatic payments that evening. Then I opened a spreadsheet and began listing every transaction I had ever made for them. Numbers tell stories most people try to hide. My career had taught me that. For 15 years, I had worked as a forensic accountant specializing in financial disputes, divorces, corporate fraud, hidden inheritance conflicts. My job was simple. Follow the money. Within 2 hours, my spreadsheet had grown uncomfortably long. Mortgage support, medical bills, car repairs, Amanda's student loans, and one payment labeled simply, wedding deposit. I stared at that entry. $20,000. Transferred 8 months earlier. Amanda had called me crying that night. "I'll pay you back after the wedding," she promised. I believed her. At the hospital, I realized something important. They had accepted my money for years. But when I needed help, they disappeared. That kind of imbalance leaves a trail. And I had spent my entire career learning how to read trails. So I did what I always do. I gathered evidence. Quietly, carefully, patiently, because truth is strongest when it's documented. 3 weeks after my surgery, my parents invited me to dinner. Amanda was there too, surrounded by bridal magazines and fabric samples. Laura, my mother said warmly, Amanda found the perfect venue. Amanda slid a brochure across the table. The ballroom looked identical to the one we were sitting in tonight. Isn't it beautiful? She said. It is. My father poured wine. Weddings are expensive, he sighed dramatically. Amanda glanced at me hopefully. I might need a little more help, she admitted. I took a slow sip of water. How much? Just 15,000, she said quickly. My mother added, family supports each other. The irony was almost elegant. I set my glass down. I'll think about it, I replied. Amanda hugged me immediately. You're the best. But I didn't transfer the money. Instead, I requested certified copies of my past financial transfers from the bank. 3 weeks later, the documents arrived in a thick envelope. Every payment, every date, every purpose. And tonight, that same envelope sat quietly on the wedding table, waiting to be opened. The wedding reception resumed, but the room had changed. People smiled for photographs, but conversations had become quieter. Curious glances moved between me, the envelope, and my parents. Amanda eventually opened it. She had waited until the speeches ended, until the cake was cut, until the guests were distracted by dancing. But curiosity wins eventually. She slid a finger under the seal and pulled out the stack of papers. Her smile faded as she read the first page. What is this? She whispered. Financial records, I said. My father leaned over her shoulder. The color drained slowly from his face. These are private, he muttered. They're accurate, I replied calmly. Amanda flipped through the pages. Every transfer had a date. Every payment had a description. Mortgage support, emergency loan, wedding deposit, and the total at the bottom. $184,600. The number sat there quietly. My mother looked up sharply. Laura, she said, her voice tight, why would you bring this here? I folded my hands on the table. Because tonight you thanked me for showing up, I said. I paused. But I've been showing up financially for years. Several guests nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Amanda swallowed. You're embarrassing us. I met her eyes. No, I said softly. I'm documenting the truth. No one made a scene. That surprised people. Instead, the reaction spread slowly through the room like cold air through an open door. Whispers started near the back tables. My cousin Marcus leaned toward me. Is that real? He asked quietly. Yes. Your parents knew? They received every transfer. Amanda pushed the papers back into the envelope. We're not discussing this tonight, she said sharply. My father stood up quickly. Everyone, he announced loudly, forcing a smile. Let's get back to celebrating. Music started again. But the atmosphere had changed. Amanda's new husband, Daniel, looked confused. What's going on? He asked her quietly. Nothing, she said. But the words sounded thin. Because Daniel had also seen the total at the bottom of the page. And numbers have a way of staying in people's minds. I left the reception shortly after. No one stopped me. But several people watched as I walked out. And I knew something important had begun. Not chaos. Not revenge. Just exposure. 3 days after the wedding, my mother called. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. You humiliated us. I clarified a misunderstanding. You brought financial records to your sister's wedding. Yes. That was cruel. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. No, I said calmly. Cruel was leaving me alone in a hospital. Silence filled the phone. My mother spoke again, softer. You're exaggerating. I called you. You said you were fine. I said I was recovering. You know how busy the wedding planning was. I almost smiled. Yes, I said. I know exactly how expensive it was too. She changed the subject quickly. You've always been good with money. That's my job. Then you should understand family support. I do. Then why stop helping? I thought carefully before answering. Because support should move in both directions. My mother didn't reply. After a moment, she hung up. And that conversation marked the beginning of something neither of us had planned. Distance. 2 weeks later, Amanda called. Her tone was very different from my mother's. Less angry. More nervous. Daniel saw the documents, she admitted. I assumed he would. He's asking questions. About what? The money. I waited. He thought Mom and Dad paid for the wedding. They paid part of it. Amanda sighed. He didn't know about the rest. That's understandable. Another pause followed. Laura, are you asking for the money back? No. Relief rushed through her voice. Oh, thank God. I'm asking for transparency. What does that mean? It means I'm no longer protecting the story. Amanda understood immediately. Our family had always presented a certain image. Responsible parents. Successful children. Quiet financial stability. My transfers had helped maintain that image. Without them, the picture looked very different. Daniel's going to find out everything, she whispered. Yes, I said. He will. The first visible crack appeared a month later. My father's small business began struggling. He owned a local construction supply company. For years, my financial transfers had quietly helped him maintain inventory during slow seasons. Now, those transfers were gone. One afternoon, he called me. His tone was careful. Laura, we might need some help. With what? Cash flow. I stirred my coffee slowly. How much? 25,000. I wasn't surprised. That number matched exactly what my spreadsheet predicted. I can't do that anymore, I said. You've always helped before. Yes. This is temporary. I understand. Then why refuse? Because the system had changed. Because the pattern had been exposed. Because continuing would erase the boundary I had drawn. I'm focusing on my own finances now, I replied. My father sighed heavily. You're punishing us. No, I said quietly. I'm correcting a habit. And habits, once interrupted, reveal how dependent people had become on them. The financial pressure didn't explode overnight. It grew slowly. My father reduced staff hours at his business. Inventory orders became smaller. Suppliers began asking questions. At the same time, Amanda and Daniel were adjusting to married life. Daniel worked as a financial advisor. Numbers mattered to him, which meant the documents he had seen at the wedding kept returning to his thoughts. One evening, he asked Amanda a direct question. How much money has Laura given your parents? Amanda hesitated. Some. Define some. She didn't know the full answer. That was the first problem. So Daniel called my father. And my father made the second mistake. He minimized the number. Daniel eventually asked me directly. We met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. I brought the same spreadsheet. When he saw the total, he leaned back in his chair slowly. Your parents told me it was about 50,000. It isn't. No, he said. It definitely isn't. That conversation changed how he saw the family he had just married into. Daniel didn't accuse anyone. He simply asked more questions. That approach made people uncomfortable. Amanda started arguing with him. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. It's almost $200,000. Laura offered. That's not the point. What is the point? The point is that no one told me the truth. Secrets rarely survive careful accounting, especially when a financial advisor starts examining them. Within weeks, Daniel had reviewed my spreadsheet several times. He noticed patterns. The mortgage assistance, the emergency payments, the wedding deposit. Your sister has been financially supporting your parents for years, he told Amanda one night. Amanda didn't like hearing that sentence, because it contradicted the family story she had grown up believing. Meanwhile, my professional life continued quietly. I accepted a new consulting contract investigating corporate expense fraud. The case required long hours but paid well. For the first time in years, all of my income stayed in my own accounts. It felt lighter. One evening, my cousin Marcus visited. I heard things are tense, he said. That's accurate. People are talking. I assumed they would. He leaned forward. Was the number real? Yes. Marcus shook his head slowly. Why didn't you say something earlier? Because protecting the family story felt easier. And now the truth feels healthier. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You know what everyone's realizing? What? That you weren't the dependent child. No, you were the safety net. And once people recognize a safety net, they also notice when it disappears. The next stage of collapse came quietly through reputation. My parents had always presented themselves as financially stable, community donors, reliable homeowners, supportive parents. But Daniel's questions had reached a few relatives. And relatives talk. Soon, several family members began asking subtle questions. How much help did Laura give? Was the business struggling? Why didn't we know about this? My mother grew defensive. She wanted to help, she told people. That part was true. But the second half of the truth mattered more. They had expected the help to continue indefinitely. And now it wasn't. Expectations, once broken, feel like betrayal to the people who relied on them. Even if the arrangement was never fair. Amanda and Daniel's marriage began feeling the strain. Not because of money, but because of honesty. Daniel had entered the family believing one story. Now he was discovering another. One night Amanda called me again. He thinks my parents took advantage of you. What do you think? I think things were complicated. Yes. He keeps asking why you never said no. I considered that carefully. Because saying no earlier would have started this conversation years ago. And that would have been worse? At the time, yes. Amanda sighed. I wish you'd told me. I wish someone had visited me in the hospital. The silence that followed was long and heavy. 2 months later, my father's business lost a major supplier contract. The supplier had grown concerned about delayed payments. Without inventory, sales slowed. Without sales, payroll became difficult. My father called me again, not asking for money this time, just talking. I didn't realize how much those transfers mattered, he admitted quietly. I know. You kept things stable. That was the intention. He paused. I should have said thank you more often. Yes, I said gently. You should have. That moment didn't erase the past, but it introduced something new. Awareness. The legal consequences appeared next. My parents had refinanced their homes several years earlier. The mortgage application listed stable income from the business. But several of the supporting bank deposits had actually been my transfers. When the bank reviewed their updated financials during a credit check, the discrepancy raised questions. Nothing illegal, but uncomfortable. They were asked to provide additional documentation. And suddenly the quiet support system that had existed for years was visible to a third party. My father called me after that meeting. They want to see our bank history. That makes sense. They'll see your deposits. Yes. Will that cause problems? Only if the explanation isn't honest. Honesty, unfortunately, had never been the family's favorite strategy. Social circles began shifting too. My parents' friends slowly learned parts of the story. Not the whole truth, but enough. People became more cautious with sympathy. Because sympathy requires believing someone was wronged. And the numbers complicated that narrative. One afternoon, my mother said something revealing. You've turned people against us. I shook my head. No. You showed them the documents. Yes. That's the same thing. No, I said calmly. It isn't. Exposure doesn't create the problem. It simply removes the curtain covering it. Amanda visited my apartment one evening. She looked tired. Daniel wants us to create a financial plan with my parents, she said. That's responsible. They hate the idea. I'm not surprised. They think he's interfering. What do you think? She sat quietly for a moment. I think he's preventing another situation like yours. That was the first time Amanda had framed the story that way. Not as a misunderstanding, but as a pattern. The financial plan Daniel proposed was simple. Clear budgets. Reduce spending. Business restructuring. No reliance on outside family transfers. My parents resisted at first. Pride can be expensive. But eventually the numbers forced their hand. They accepted the plan. And for the first time in years, their finances began stabilizing without my support. Ironically, the system worked better than the old one, because it was based on reality, not hidden assistance. A year after the wedding, my life looked very different. My consulting work had expanded into a full investigative firm. I hired 2 analysts, opened a small office downtown, and focused on financial accountability cases. The irony wasn't lost on me. My professional work mirrored the lesson my own family had learned. Transparency prevents collapse. Amanda and Daniel visited my office one afternoon. Amanda looked around the workspace proudly. "You built all this?" "Yes." Daniel nodded respectfully. "You're very good at what you do." "I've had practice." He smiled slightly. "And patience." "Yes," I said. "That too." My parents eventually visited as well. The conversation was quieter than any we had ever had. My father looked around the office, thoughtfully. "I didn't realize how successful you'd become," he said. "You were busy." He nodded slowly. "That's true." For the first time, he looked genuinely reflective. "Our family gatherings are different now. Smaller. More honest. Less dependent on appearances. Sometimes people still mention the wedding. The envelope. The number at the bottom of the page. But now those moments feel like history rather than scandal. Because what followed mattered more than the exposure itself. The adjustments. The accountability. The rebuilding. Looking back, the hospital room was the real beginning of everything. That quiet moment when I realized something fundamental. I had spent years protecting a story that wasn't healthy for anyone. Not for me. Not for them. The envelope at Amanda's wedding didn't destroy my family. It forced us to see ourselves clearly. And clarity, though uncomfortable, creates stronger foundations than silence ever could. In the end, the most powerful thing I did wasn't exposing the numbers. It was deciding that my generosity would no longer require my invisibility.